hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about collection management. This is kind of nerdy and boring, I guess maybe, unless you love books, and then you probably find this interesting because I am always very interested in kind of hearing about how people decide what goes in their collection, what they get rid of, what they, read from the library versus what they buy, all of that kind of stuff. I also do think it's relevant because I will be doing book hauls and such on this channel, but I thought it would probably be a good idea to give you guys some sense of what types of books I will be showing you guys as physical books versus what in my collection is going to be ebooks. So I know on BookTube there's a lot of physical book hauls, and I certainly also do buy a lot of physical books. I mean, hello, like what you're seeing is just I have hundreds and hundreds of physical books. So it's not that I don't love buying physical books and that I don't love kind of the feel of them in my hands and all that good stuff. I definitely read physical books, I buy physical books, I check physical books out from the library, all that good stuff. However, I don't just read physical books. I actually read a lot of ebooks. There's kind of three things that have influenced me switching from having primarily physical books to really about half and half in my collection. Probably up till about 3 or 4 years ago, I had about 1,000 books that I owned, and the vast majority of those were physical books. So paperback, hardback, mass market, soft cover, every kind of book you can think of, and the majority of them were physical books. However, that has changed in the last couple of years, and now I have about 1,500 books in my collection, and I would say that it's really about 50-50 as to whether or not they're ebooks or they're physical books. And there's three reasons that I've kind of made that shift over time. First and foremost, to be honest, is storage. So when I was younger and not in charge of moving, I was much more willing to accumulate a lot of physical books because ultimately I was not going to be the one responsible for hauling them from point A to point B. However, as I have become the one responsible for hauling them from point A to point B, I'm much more judicious about which books I'm actually willing to put that kind of effort in for. And to give you an idea of why this is a big deal to me, since I was about 10 years old, I would say that I've moved on average once every 2 years. Not necessarily moving cities, but moving house. So when you're moving that frequently, after a while you kind of have to look around and say, is it really worth all the time, effort, and frankly expense to be moving these books all of the time? So that's one piece of it, as well as the fact that I've not only moved house, but I have moved cities 4 times in the last 8 years. So that's a much more significant move when you move city as opposed to house. And one of those moves was actually to Canada. So I moved from Washington, D.C. to Vancouver, Canada. And having to figure out what books I wanted to take versus which ones I wanted to leave behind with my parents for a while, it kind of helped me rethink my whole strategy in terms of, do I really want to have a physical copy of every single book I own, or are there books that would make more sense for me to have in ebook form where they are much more portable? The second thing that's kind of changed why and how I collect books is simply the way that I read. So 4 years ago, let's say, I had an e-reader that I did use and did enjoy, but I would still say that it wasn't my primary way of reading books. The biggest thing that I enjoyed my e-reader for at that time was for getting books out from the library, which I still love. As a side note, if you're not checking ebooks out from the library, please investigate this, because it's all the benefits of having it from the library, i.e. you are not paying for it, and you do not have to worry about what you're ultimately going to do with this book in terms of storing it or moving it. But it is, because it's an electronic copy, you don't have to worry about actually taking it back to the library. So when your loan of it has ended, it just disappears, and you don't have to worry about late fees and none of that bullshit. But aside from using it for library books, I don't know that I owned a ton of actual ebooks that I was interested in reading and keeping in my collection long term. A lot of that was because I found that ebooks were too expensive, given that you didn't get to actually keep a copy of the book permanently, because if you think about it, an ebook is essentially a indefinite lease rather than outright ownership of a physical book. So I felt like 8, 9, whatever, however much money ebooks tended to go for was just too much for that kind of arrangement. However, subsequent to that, I have really made a lot of strides in figuring out how to get ebooks that I want to read, not just any old ebooks, but books that I'm interested in ebook form for inexpensive to free. I now buy a ton of ebooks because I figured out a number of tools to help me do that in a way that is very cost effective. And I'm pretty sure that at some point I will have a series on here about how I get my books for not retail, because it is borderline against my religion to pay retail prices for books. So once I started having a lot more ebooks because I was able to get them for a much better price, I started reading on my e-reader a lot more. And nowadays, I have to say, I'm not going to say I prefer an ebook to a physical book, because I don't think that's quite the case. But in terms of the convenience factor of having one small thing that I can toss in my purse and take with me anywhere, whether it's to work for lunch hour if I want to read, all the way to if I go to Timbuktu, I can take the same thing with me. The convenience of that, I think, has been really appealing to me, especially because I'm somebody who is very temperamental about my TBR, right? So I don't plan out at the beginning of the month exactly what books I want to read. When I decide that I have some time and I want to sit down and read, it's in that moment that I'm making a decision about what it is I'm going to read, right? Having the ability to have 150 books in my TBR on my e-reader right now and choose any of them to read when I sit down is a really appealing thing to me, as opposed to taking a physical book where I'm kind of committed and locked into what book I'm reading right now. And the third reason I've made a big shift in terms of kind of what types of books comprise my collection is sort of a shift in the value proposition of books over the last few years. And what I mean by that is 10 years ago, when e-readers were, I don't even think, a thing at that point, where reading electronically was not an option, essentially most of the books that I now own as ebooks, I would have instead had as a mass market paperback. They were inexpensive and disposable, at least in their physical form, right? Mass market paperbacks are not built to last the test of time. You know, one bad incident with a bathtub and they are down for the count. So mass market paperbacks are sort of by their nature sort of ephemeral, temporary forms, right? And the way I look at my ebooks is these are all books that I would have in the past had in mass market form. But now it does not make sense to buy them in mass market form because they're more expensive that way usually. And they just are not physically going to stand the test of rereads or just life, basically. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to spend or invest money in a mass market paperback when I could get the ebook instead. I also think that kind of the rise of the hardback, and I'm not sure if the numbers bear out on this, but I think even if you just look around at BookTube, sort of like these beautiful kind of lavish hardback editions where they're very lovingly crafted. They have like deckled edges or, you know, different colored edges around the sides, beautiful fonts, things like that. I think possibly what's happening is that we're moving into sort of a analogous situation to music, where you have the people who want a physical experience in music are now collecting vinyl, right? So it's a beautiful kind of artifact of their music listening. It's not that it's not functional. I mean, you have a record player and you can listen to the music that way, and many people argue that the quality of doing that is better anyway. But you have sort of that physical artifact, and then pragmatically, if you're just like on the go trying to listen to things, you listen to it on your iPhone or whatever, right? So, and I think that that may be kind of where we're moving as an industry in books, but I know for me, that is kind of what the value proposition is. So either I want something that is very portable, very like no fuss, like brass tacks, here is the words that are in this book. i.e. an ebook, or I want something that is a really beautiful copy of a book, i.e. a hardback. So all of this to say, and now that I've said that, you probably know where I'm going with this, I have gotten to a point where in my collection, I am really making an effort that if I have a physical book, it is a hardback. Now, I'm not throwing away all my paperbacks or all my trade editions, anything like that. I'm not saying that I'm just getting rid of anything that's not a hardback. What I'm saying is books that are coming into my collection in general now are going to be hardbacks. And if I can't justify owning it in a hardback, that means it probably should be an ebook. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this. So for one, there are some paperbacks in my collection that I got in grad school or that I've made annotations in. I'm gonna have a hard time letting go of any of those paperbacks really ever. The only way that I would possibly let those go is if I was willing to sit down and put the time in to transfer my annotations from a softcover edition to a hardback. So that is clearly an exception. The other exception I would say is that if the ebook is priced in such a way that it is the same or higher price than a physical copy, I will not buy it. That is just like, I just can't get my mind to go there. If my choice is an $8 ebook or a $7 paperback, I will buy the paperback. Again, my goal ultimately, if I like that book, will be to get it in hardback, but I'm willing to get a paperback if the ebook is more expensive and I cannot get it from the library. The other kind of exception to this rule is used bookstores. So, and I'll get into this whenever I do my series on how I get books for cheap or free. But if I have mass market paperbacks that I have gotten from the used bookstore and I know that they are going to be staying in my collection only on a temporary basis, so essentially I tend to use a used bookstore almost like an extended library copy. So I get it, I read it in my own time, and when I'm done, I take it back and trade it in for trade credit. In that sense, it is not permanently in my collection, and therefore I'm fine with acquiring mass markets or paperbacks that way if I know that they are not going to be permanent editions. However, anytime from now on, basically, that I'm acquiring a book that I intend to be a permanent member of my collection, my policy is to acquire it in hardback. And usually the kind of scenario I'm talking about is either it's a new release from one of my favorite authors. So for instance, a new Alona Andrews book in the Kate Daniel series. I order those in hardcover because I know that I want them to be in my collection indefinitely. Right? So I will order a new book that I have not read in a hardback if I know that it's going to be a permanent edition. The other scenario in which I would get a brand new hardback is that I have read the book already, either from the library or sometimes even as an ebook. But if I feel that it's something that I'm going to want to reference, not just as sort of a casual reread, but like underlining, or if I think that I might write a paper or an article about it someday, I want to have that as a physical book, and I want to have it as a hardback. So a lot of my new hardback acquisitions tend to be books that I've already read, but that I am making a permanent member of my collection. So all of this is to say, I certainly will have hauls on this channel, right? So I enjoy watching them, and I think people enjoy watching them from other booktubers. Fair enough. But I do just want to put out a word of caution that I actually don't acquire physical books at the same kind of rapacious rate that I do ebooks. So whenever I do kind of a physical book haul, you can expect that I will also have quite a large ebook haul to go along with it, simply because I give myself every month a $50 ebook budget, and I can stretch that really far because I know how to find the deals, I know how to find the sales, I know how to get ebooks for free. So because of that, I do tend to acquire a lot of ebooks every month. So that means that every month I will probably have quite a few physical books to talk about, but I'm also going to have a lot of ebooks to talk about. So I wanted to kind of give you guys sort of a sense as to what my philosophy is for my collection, at least as of now. I definitely go back and forth a lot about, am I acquiring things in the right way? I don't know, it's such a book nerd thing. It's such a nerdy thing to spend time kind of contemplating like, should I be getting that soft cover edition or should I really just wait and spring $7 extra for a hardback? But these are the things that I spend time thinking about, and I assume that if you like BookTube, these are maybe things you spend time thinking about as well. So, if you are a big fat nerd and you like to think about how you're kind of managing your collection, let me know how you do it in the comments. Or if you're somebody who just sort of says, screw it, I'll take any book, any form I can get, let me know that too. I'd love to hear more about how other people are thinking about this topic because it's something I do spend a lot of time contemplating. That's another round in my 30 days of content. I will be back tomorrow, and if you like what you're seeing, hit that subscribe button, maybe comment, follow me on Instagram or Twitter, something like that. I'll have that linked below. And yeah, I'm having so much fun doing this, and I guess I will just see you guys tomorrow. Bye!